Imagine you're a young man who favors art, but his country asks him to become a fighter pilot because the nation is at war. Then you're asked to bomb Hawaii. This is a true story never told before. Here on Figments, the Power of Imagination, I'm Think Tech Hawaii. I'm really excited about today because I'm going to have an elderly gentleman who has quite a story to tell. And as I said, it hasn't been told before. I'm Dan Figleaf, and I'm the host of Figments, the Power of Imagination. We try to entertain and inspire, and I suspect we'll do both today with a really great story about this fighter pilot artist turned fighter pilot turned artist. So I actually have a picture. First, let me do the title slide because I took the time to make it on PowerPoint. My guest is Lieutenant Colonel retired Bob Kenai Keeney, U.S. Air Force. I bet you thought he was from Japan. I do have a picture of Kenai's airplane when he was asked to bomb Hawaii. That might not be it. Let me welcome Bob Kenai Keeney. Kenai, aloha.
Aloha. Great
Was
to be
that
with
your
you,
was
Fig.
that your bird there, Kenai, that I had?
I, th- I think mine was pretty ugly, but not that ugly. No, that wasn't it.
So Kenai was my boss in the 426th Killer Claws, claw.
Claw, claw,
So we
claw.
say. And a great mentor. He was the squadron commander when I was an ops officer. Much of what I learned about leadership, I learned from Kenai. And he's truly got a unique story of being an Air Force fighter pilot with a penchant for art. We're going to look at both of those while we talk about being asked to bomb Hawaii, because he was asked to bomb Hawaii with live bombs and not on a practice range. You're not going to believe this one. Kenai, you sent me a bunch of pictures, pictures of pictures, and your pictures from your career. So I put together this little montage, I think we call it. And I love this because it shows you as a cadet at Texas A&M, or a student, maybe you were called, then and you look like somebody who would give underclassmen a real hard time. Then as a student in pilot training, and all of us who went through pilot training remember, you're just trying to get through, man. Stay out of the way, stay out of the target, and
Keep
get
your
through.
lunch down.
Keep your lunch down, don't vomit, little stuff like that. And then maybe a year and a half later in Southeast Asia as an A-7 fighter pilot. And I would submit that you're a different person in many ways in each of those pictures. What do you think?
Oh yeah, yes. First of all, I'm 72 years old. I'm probably one of the younger people you'll meet who actually had combat time in Southeast Asia, because I went right through 4 years of college and right into pilot training, and then right into, after survival schools and then A7 school, and then went
Yep.
right to Southeast Asia, and still didn't get there until the last month of the air war over in Southeast Asia. So yeah, that was quite a change. And that picture of me as a cadet, I was a squadron commander of about 80 people, and that was more a responsibility than I had until I was a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force. So that was quite a thing. And
And
there's
you
my
had a
hero
sword,
shot from.
which
I
was
did have
nice.
I did have a sword,
Mhm.
which my
Yeah.
son actually carried. He actually went through the same squadron as I did, and he has a picture
Wow.
looking very much like that because the uniform didn't change much at all.
And then you're in pilot training, your hero shot, and then you're in the
Yes,
war.
and I was in the war, and I was really lucky. I went through pilot training, and I was lucky for when I made my choices to have finished high enough in the class to get the airplane I wanted, which was a single seat airplane, which I had a hard time keeping my lunch down in T-37s, and I desperately wanted to get the other person out of my plane. So I was so happy to get that A7,
Yeah,
and
I
it was
want
such
to
a such
show
a
folks
wonderful.
some A7s here if we can, to show the svelte, stout
Yes,
little, but single seat, and that's key.
yes, the short little ugly fellow, we called it, fellow.
Yeah,
And
whatever.
you see the tiger teeth on those planes. As the squadron artiste, I was in charge of putting those on the plane correctly, and I had helpers and stencils and stuff. That was one of my jobs as squadron artiste. But yeah, we were those airplanes. We were stationed at we were TDY to Barbers Point, Hawaii, in 1975, 76 on an exercise, and we actually were flying a live a live firepower demonstration continuously on the Big Island in the
Putting
saddleback
on a
between.
show for the Army and other folks, right? Let me explain what that
Uh,
means to
okay,
yeah, so it's dropping real bombs, and napalm probably, and shooting rockets and shooting the gun. It's good training in a demanding environment, but, I wanna go back a little bit to the A-7. It's a single seat airplane. It's our first really, computer assisted bombing. There's a lot manual to it, but you get more help. It's a high-tech fighter. It doesn't look like it. Um, and it is single seat. So I'm gonna lead you back to that picture in Southeast Asia. Becoming a single seat fighter pilot in combat is something that almost everybody else wouldn't want to do. But guys like us and gals like us who want to fly fighters would rather be no other place. Agree or disagree?
agree. I agree. And it was a wonderful airplane. I'll tell you, it wasn't the prettiest airplane. If you went to the flight line with your girlfriend, you might point to another airplane. That's the one I fly. Like this one over here, the very beautiful looking Eagle. You might
Yep,
say that's my
that
plane,
we flew
but
together.
that we flew together. And I flew for 15 years in the Air Force. But the A7 was beautiful in its own way. It had a kind of a small computer by today's standards. You're not much more than an Atari. But you got to keep in mind that we went to the moon with a 4K computer.
Yeah.
And the A7 had just a fantastic avionics suite. It was a game changer in its way. It had a inertial navigation system tied in to the computer. It had a Doppler system to update that, so you always knew where you were. And one of the ways you knew where you were was we had a projected map display, actually a little round
Hmm.
scope there that continuously showed where you were on a map, which is something I really wish we'd had in the Eagle, but
Yep,
because
absolutely.
because we would not have gotten lost as much as we did. But anyway,
And
it
it
was
was years
fantastic.
until they eventually, in later models of the F-15, had a uh, poor person's version of that.
Yeah,
Nothing like the wound map display in the slough. And it was, you're right, it was not attractive. It was the airplane I wanted to fly out of pilot training, Kenai. I think I've told you this, for two reasons. One, it was high tech. More importantly, it was single seat, and my social skills are ideally suited to being alone. So I thought that was had nothing to do with vomiting, but I knew I could, if I was single seat, I'd be flying with my best friend. Um, but it was a great airplane. Unfortunately, it when I graduated from pilot training, they weren't available because there were
yeah.
engine problems. It was not overpowered, was it?
No, no, it was not. We had what we actually upgraded from the Navy airplane. We put a TF-41 Allison engine in it, which produced more thrust, but still on a hot day with as much stuff as we carried. Like the airplane weighed about 23,000 pounds, and we could carry 23,000 pounds worth of bombs and fuel and rockets and all this kind of stuff. And with that load, it was really an adventure getting off the runway. So it didn't have an afterburner, but it could fly around with this fan engine, which was something new.
Right.
Most fighter jets back in those days were turbojets. This was a fan jet. It was very efficient. We could fly around at 450 plus all day at low altitude, and nobody else
450
could do that.
knots, 500
450
plus
knots, about
miles an
about
hour.
500 miles an hour.
And on your second combat sortie, you almost didn't get it airborne because,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
right?
I used all but 300 feet of the runway at Karad Air Base. I had a load of rockets and cluster bomb units and tanks. And about 2/3 into my takeoff roll, one of my rocket pods, which has what they call a frangible nose cone, just exploded, and
Yep.
it became flat plate drag, and it slewed me to the right. And I had some time to think about what was going to happen next because I wasn't accelerating. My takeoff speed was about 200 miles an hour. Let's put it that way. And I could see the end of the runway coming up, and my options were limited. I could either jettison everything, or I could eject, or I could
Hmm.
just that was really or I could punch everything off, in which case all that ordnance is going to be flying in formation with me down the runway. So I did make it off the runway in the last 300 feet. I disappeared over the horizon. People were looking for smoke out there. And basically, I managed to just barely keep the airplane airborne in ground effect until I got enough airspeed to join my leader, who wondered where the heck I was at this point. And then we continued on down to Cambodia
So,
to do our mission.
to do your mission. So people might think you must have been terrified. I'm going to answer for you, just so we can stay. You're not. You're too busy to be terrified.
Yeah.
And I suspect if it does kill you, and you know you're going to be a flaming mess in the on the terrain, that there is a second where you actually are terrified. But once you fly out of it, you feel, yeah, I did that. You know, pretty cool.
Yes, you get kind of tensed up a little bit, but you are thinking fairly fast. I was what we used to
Busy.
call cutting buttonholes in my seat cushion. Those of you with imagination know what I'm talking about here.
Right. So let's get back to bombing Hawaii, which you
Okay.
actually were asked to do. I mean, you and I, as we've done many times in the past, could talk about flying for hours, weeks, months, years. And we'll
Yes.
probably do that at our little claw reunion here coming up in November. So there you are. You've survived the Southeast Asia War. You're deployed to Hawaii, flying show formations that are probably illegal, um, off Waikiki. You got a bomb with your then
Oh,
fiance's name, I think. So Kina, you're just doing firepower demos and living large and going sailing and having life, and they ask you to bomb Mauna Loa, the volcano on the Big Island, right? And
yes.
why?
Yeah. Yes. We were
Why?
doing this
Why?
firepower. Well, well, we had a briefing with some geologists from Hawaii. They came in with some Air Force brass and actually some Navy brass, and they told us that they had rim activity on Mauna Loa, which they'd had before, and it was creating these lava tunnels that were slowly moving toward the city of Hilo. And and they said, well, they wanted to know if we could actually bomb the sides of these things and divert the lava flow. Now these tubes are really large and very slow moving, and we said, yeah, we can do that. And they basically tested us. They put some panels on the ground, and we bombed those with BDU 33s, which is a little 25-pound blue
Small
practice
25
bombs.
pound. Yeah.
This one, and we actually hit the targets. We were good at that. So they said, "Oh yeah, we trust you now to hit the sides of the volcano." So, or the sides of the tube. So they would basically put these big, about 25-foot white panels on the sides of the lava tubes, and they told us to have at it. We took off
Yeah.
with a pick. I'm sorry.
Well, I want to point out to show this old airplane again. This is a B-5A. This was not the
Yes.
first time this had happened. The
Yes.
Army Air Corps at the time in 1935 had tried this with smaller bombs and a lot less accuracy. They did it again in 1942 when it was an emergency. Again, the lava flows. But in 1976, it was kind of an experiment, wasn't
Well,
it?
they didn't express it that way to us. They said it was real lava flow that was coming down, and they put the panels out for us to bomb on the sides of the lava flow. Now, if you see the reports that have been published since, it makes it sound like it was an experiment. That's not what they were telling us. They were telling us these were real flows, and they also said we were successful at it. We actually crushed the sides of some of these tubes. We made with these 2,000-pound bombs. We made about 100-foot craters in the side of them, and we also bombed um, what are called spatter cones, which are
Yeah.
little mini volcanoes that come out the side of the volcano. So we dropped over a period of about a week. We dropped 36 of these two grandeurs, and the Hawaii geologists told us we had to keep this to ourselves. It has to be quiet. And I can't imagine that if this was going on, it wouldn't, and people knew about it, it wouldn't be on the front page of the Honolulu Star
Yeah.
Advertiser, whatever
As
newspaper you
as
had down
far as
there at
I
the
can
time.
tell, it wasn't. And we just
It
showed
wasn't.
an A7 with a 2,000 pounder, a little bomb 101, folks. Kina
Yeah.
and I have both dropped 500-pound bombs. They're kind of impressive, especially if you're near where they hit. A 2,000 pounder is really different. And I wouldn't say it's a small nuke, but it's a big explosion. So the notion that you're going to drop, and you guys eventually dropped 36 of these 2,000 pounders on the volcano. Kina, can you imagine the meeting where they decided to ask the Air Force to do this? Yeah, yeah, I got an idea. Yeah, let's go bomb the volcano.
Yeah.
How does that
Well,
happen?
I don't know how it came down the chain of command. I was just a guy told to go out and do it, and it was a fun time. Dropping a two grander off your airplane really, you really get quite a bit of lift when those thing goes off. Plus, you can see it. It's so big you can see it fly right down to where
Yep.
it hits. pretty exciting stuff. Plus, it makes about a 2,000-foot plume up into the air. So how we keep this secret from people, I really don't know. But they did a good job because you really didn't hear much about it anywhere,
So
and it was kind
if
of
you,
sad for us.
yeah,
We
you
we
wanted to be
thought,
the heroes of Hilo, right? Because you'd save
heroes a
Hilo.
hero. We thought we might at least get a free drink out of it at the bar,
Uh,
but no,
Bummer.
no.
And if you folks, if you do an internet search, as I did in preparation for today's episode, of course, you'll find almost nothing. Key and I found uh, um, a report, an academic style report from a U.S. geologist, a government geologist, and somebody at headquarters Pacific Air Forces in 1980. There's no trace of this. There's plenty about the 1935 bombings, the 1942 bombings, but somehow they kept it quiet. Were they to seek to do this again, which I think is unlikely given the paperwork, let's say, that would have to be
Yeah.
done to get approval, I don't think they'd keep it secret. Um, so it worked, but we probably won't do it again unless there's a real emergency, like is depicted in the Korean movie Ashfall, which is about North Korean and South Korean forces joining together to stop a volcano at the North Korea-China border. I just learned about that movie today. So let me take a very quick break and tell you that you can find the episodes from previous editions of Figments, The Power of Imagination, and Figments on Reality, the show I did for about a year, at these QR codes. So feel free to scan that. We'll leave it up there long enough. And of course, I will be back next in 2 weeks with another show. I'm not sure what it will be, probably about flying because that seems to be pretty popular. Okay, so as I said, I worked for Kenai, and he was a tremendous mentor. Uh, but we knew he had artistic talent because we had paintings in the squadron that he had done. And Bob, I always thought that you just, you always did art, but it's a far more exquisite evolution than that. Tell us how you got to be an artist as a squadron artiste and then a real artist. And here's a picture that was in the squadron that Bob and I served in together with his daughter, Katie, who now serves as a foreign service officer in the U.S. State Department. Thank you for your service, Katie. Go ahead. Tell
Well,
me how this evolved as the squadron artiste turned real artiste.
I can always draw well, and then later I started to paint, especially when I got into some of the fighter squadrons. I thought they needed some aviation art on the wall, so I started doing that. In fact, when I was at Langley in 1976 when the first wing started up there, and I had one of the Bitburg squadron commanders, Fred Fitzsimmons, came through and saw some of my paintings and said, "Did you do this, Kenai?" I said, "Yes." He said, "I need a squadron artiste," and he got me orders within a week to go to Bitburg. He didn't say, "I need a really good pilot," or anything. He says, "I need a
Yeah,
squadron
but
artiste."
but you were a good pilot, and I would just point out, Kina, that every good fighter squadron, as we both know, has a unique collection of talent. And there are a few
Yes,
things you need. You need an artiste. You need somebody to make sure the bar is nice wood. Thanks, Doc Doolittle. He was not a pilot,
yes,
but Doc gave us you need a piano, must have a piano player. We'll see our
yeah,
piano player, Dave Lewins in Arizona.
Loins.
Um, and so on. You've got to have this collection of talent. You want to win the golf tournament, you have to have one good golfer. That's exactly why we hired Smutty Smith in the squadron. He was an incredible fighter pilot, but this collection of talent makes a good squadron great. So you were
And I
the
have to say,
artiste.
Fig, I have to say, Fig, I was the squadron commander and also the squadron artiste, and you were the ops officer. We had the best fighter squadron that I
We
have ever
did.
been in. It was amazing. We had a
Yep.
most amazing group of people who worked together really well. And we not only taught those guys how to be good F-15 pilots, we showed them what a fighter squadron is supposed to look like. And I really think that a lot of those
Yep.
guys
I
went
agree.
on and later said to themselves, if I ever get to be a squadron commander, I want it to look like this because we had such a great team. And you were such a great ops officer. You made it really easy for me to do my job. It's fantastic.
So
And
thanks. It
I
was
was
a labor of love. Yeah.
really proud of your climb up the ladder.
Well, thanks. So you did a bunch of art throughout your military career. And that includes later here's an A7 with artistic license based on the
Yes,
volcano bombing because it has two Mark 84s
yes.
on each wing, and it's the wrong landscape. That's from Kauai as opposed to the Big Island. But that's a
Yes.
pretty, in the past, had I not we not had this conversation, that's a pretty simple painting. It's kind of an airplane and the landscape, and I'm colorblind, as you may or may not recall. Um, but but I think it looks okay. But uh, what later, after you work for the airlines, you like to say you work for a nonprofit company, American Airlines. Your
Yes.
paintings are more refined, even when they're airplanes. And I'm showing this because this is a painting of my jet in combat that we'll get to there. And folks, let me unblur my background here, and you'll see it behind me if that's the painting up above my head there. So that's more sophisticated, frankly. How did that evolution to become a real artist happen?
Well, like you said, I had a relatively perfect career in the Air Force. I spent 20 years just flying single seat fighters, and when I finally got out in 1991, I had a lot of time on my hands, like 3 or 4 days a week off, and I decided, among a lot of other things, I was going to make a deep dive into art and learn how to do it. So I started. I got some books on the way the old masters learned, and the way the old masters learned was painting copies of old masters. So I started making reproductions of things, a lot of bad forgeries of other people's pictures. But I learned a lot of things like how to prime canvases and how to do underpainting. Oil painting takes several layers. It's a lot of patience. And that picture, yes, I think, is a really nice picture. That it has a lot of cool elements in it, including
Hmm.
the reflection of the afterburner. The kind of a hazy day that you have at Aviano quite a bit of the time, and
Yeah, it
the
was.
ordnance you're taking off with, it really has a sense of purpose, I think. And I have to say also, big for people who don't know it, Dan Leaf was the wing commander there. As a one-star general commanding the Air Force's largest composite wing in a very righteous exercise called Allied Force. It was 1999, and it was one of the most successful uses of air power in Air Force history. And it was basically to keep the Republic of Yugoslavia from committing genocide against Kosovo Albanians. And it was so successful. We very few civilians got hurt. Almost nobody on our side got hurt. It was over in a couple of months. It turned the government over. And the reason you don't know about it is it was so successful that people don't remember it. It seems all we remember is our
Hmm.
failures. So
Yep.
I think that would be the dream of every fighter pilot, is to be in that position, Pig, to be that wing commander, taking off and leading those people on that mission.
It was the easiest job I ever had because I had people like us working for me in a righteous cause. And I had the example that you'd provided. So
Thank
thanks.
you.
But let's get back to art. And
Okay.
so I love that painting as well. I've got my jacket behind me on the chair that you painted a claw eagle on, and that I received at the Pearl Harbor Aviation Museum at
Yeah,
my retirement
that's right.
roast. I got what quick aside on that. An Army general officer, I retired as a 3-star. I don't believe it either. Came to me afterwards because it was a real roast, and he said, "Big, are Air Force parties always like this?" I said, "I hope so." So, um, so anyway, you progressed technically, and one of the paintings you uh, sent me as an example is this photo of apples, and that looks like an exercise in artistic perfection to me. Is that a good way? Was this
Yeah,
like practice in getting it as perfect as you can?
yeah, it's just a good example of still lifes. I've been doing a lot of very finely detailed still lifes on masonite board, which is quite takes
Hmm.
quite a bit of patience. But I've got a whole raft of these kind of things around the house. Yeah, that took me about like 6 7 hours to knock that out, and it takes several layers, and it's a
Wow.
little bit of finesse.
6 or 7 hours, it would take, well, I couldn't do it. It wouldn't take me a certain time. You talked about uh, the masters and uh, copying them, not counterfeiting, but practicing. This one, because of both its striking beauty and the story behind it, intrigue me because they reflect you as I know you. Tell a little bit about this painting, please.
Yeah, this is called the Fighting Temeraire being towed to be broken up. It's actually one of the most famous pictures that you'll find in England. It's very evocative, as an artist might say. What it is, this airplane, this ship, the Temeraire, was in the Battle of Trafalgar, and it was a
Hmm.
hero ship. It actually had subdued two French ships on either side of it, pounded them into submission, and later it was later, of course, decommissioned and became kind of a hulk. And what this picture, the painter, the guy who actually did the original, J.M.W. Turner, uh, England's greatest landscape artist, he actually
Mm.
painted this picture. The idea was, here you have this ghost ship being towed up the Thames River by this newfangled steam machine to be broken up. And really, what it represents at the time was all of the old soldiers of the Napoleonic Wars that were kicking off, just like our World War II
Wow.
veterans are, and even our Vietnam veterans are nowadays. So it's something I think you and I can relate to a little bit.
Wow. Um, and you paint a lot for other folks. You don't, maybe you make some money. We have your website. If you look for Bob Keeney Fine Art on Facebook, you can find it there. And I think we've shown the website during the show, but you paint for other people. For example, I went into a Chilean defense school office where the Air Force two-star was in charge, but he had a picture of a ship behind him. And I said, dude, you're a fighter pilot, man. Why do you have a ship? And he and I graciously painted a beautiful picture of a Chilean F-16, like my friend Eduardo Mann had flown. So you give a lot of yourself in your artwork, and that's pretty cool. Uh, Got one more picture, I think, of your nurse, as we call her,
Yes.
Barb. You guys are a great team, and I can't wait to see you in November when we have our little reunion. There's so much that we could talk about, not just from what we've talked about already, but from our time together. But let me ask you what your next figment is. I tend to close with your next figment. What's the next thing you want to do? Could be the next painting, could be the next getting over some recent surgery and starting to ride your bike again. What's next on Bob Keeney's list?
Well, the next thing for me is learning to walk again.
Yeah,
I just had my right hip replaced, so I'm getting around with a cane. I've been spoiled by my nurse wife for about 5 weeks now, so I'm hoping to get better with that.
I
And
bet
I
she's
plan to
as
make
anxious for your recovery as you are.
yes. And Smurf asked me to make a print for the reunion, and I'm putting that together. I'm thinking of doing a Bob
Uh,
Keeney original print for this, painting for this November reunion, which
or
should be a
the
lot of fun.
426 killer claw. Kenai,
Yes.
thanks. Thanks for everything. I'll never thank you enough for all the things you gave me in terms of lessons. And one of the things that you taught me when I became your ops officer, suddenly, we both went into this job as commander and ops officer with little notice, were things that Yating, you remember as a little
All right.
5-year-old, I think, Kenai,
Yeah.
shared on Imagine Effective Leadership episode of Figments. You can find it on the playlist. And she is a leadership guru. I rewatched that episode, folks. If you haven't seen it, go see it again. But she talked about things that make us happy, connecting, having a purpose, and mastering something. So that's really the key to happiness. And Kenai, you've connected with the world and with people through your art with a altruistic purpose, and you've really mastered it. So, what would Fig do? Something like that, except I have no artistic talent. So I just say, continue your lifelong growth. You're never done. Keep growing, keep trying. It's worth it. Kenai, thanks so much. I'll see you in
Thank,
November.
thank you. It's been great being on your show.
Okay, and thanks to Think Tech Hawaii, a great nonprofit corporation here in Hawaii that makes it possible for citizen journalists like yours truly to bring you Figments, the Power of Imagination, and 30 other shows every week. So please donate to Think Tech Hawaii and keep us on the air. See you next time.
Thank you so much for watching Think Tech Hawaii. If you like what we do, please like us and click the subscribe button on YouTube and the follow button on Vimeo. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and donate to us at thinktechhawaii.com. Mahalo.